It is very unlikely that wide receiver Mike Williams is back on the Chargers in 2024, but is there any way they can get some trade value back for their former first-round pick?
You are Locked On Chargers, your daily podcast on the Los Angeles Chargers, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is up, and welcome into the Locked On Chargers podcast. I'm your host, Daniel Wade, joined as always by my co-host, David Drogemeyer. We've been covering the Chargers together now for 8 seasons, but this is our 6th year as the host of the Locked On Chargers podcast, bringing you your team every day. Thank you to all the everydayers for making us your first listen today, and to make sure you never miss the show, go subscribe or follow for free on the Locked On Chargers YouTube channel, and listen wherever you get your podcast from. David, what do we got today?
Well, Daniel, with some very difficult decisions upcoming with the Chargers' current cap situation, one of the questions is what is going to happen with Mike Williams? Can the Chargers find somebody to get a trade for him to secure his services? Corey Linsley helping the Chargers out big time, even though it's 99% sure that he's going to retire. He helped the Chargers out, gave them some cap relief. And will new Chargers general manager Joe Ortiz keep his pick at 5th overall, or is he going to trade it away?
That's a spicy one, and that's what we're getting into today because it is Chargers buy or sell, getting into the biggest Chargers storylines and overreactions, and there's a lot of things flying around right now. But today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDON for $20 off your first purchase. A lot of people, David, have talked about the fact that the Chargers are unlikely to keep, 2 of the big 4 cap hits that they have with Keenan Allen, Mike Williams, Joey Bosa, and Khalil Mack. And everyone has pretty much decided at this point, with what Keenan Allen's been able to do, him balling out the way that he did last year, it's very unlikely, or I guess makes it a very easy decision on which of Keenan Allen or Mike Williams to keep, even though both of them have been very productive with this team at one point or another. The injuries for Mike Williams make the conversation a little bit tougher, but I don't think what a lot of people were talking about is if the Chargers can potentially get something back for Mike Williams. So that's why I wanted to start this buy or sell today with the Chargers will find a way to trade Mike Williams, buy or sell.
Yeah, this one's really difficult. I have to sell it because everyone in the league knows that the Chargers are in a very bad cap situation. And they know that there's going to be some very difficult decisions that they're going to have to make. And the fact of the matter is Mike Williams is 29 years old going into his age 30 season, and he's dealt with a variety of different injuries, including the most recent one, which is, a torn ACL. So he's recovering from a torn ACL. He's a $17 million base salary. And the fact is the teams know that the Chargers have to make moves to get cap compliant. So why would they, try to, spend a draft pick to bring him into the fold if they think that the Chargers are just going to end up releasing him anyway? The only way they could make that work is if they can somehow convince them to spend draft capital to secure his services in order to get one of the best jump ball receivers in the game.
This is the thing. I think the hard part for a lot of people is they know what Mike Williams' game is at the top of his game and how good he can be, and it's hard to imagine that there's not a team in the NFL, especially a contending team, that he wouldn't make better and make closer to winning, right, in the right situations. Would I say he's a wide receiver 1 on a lot of teams? No. Would I say he would be a top-end wide receiver 2 on many teams? Absolutely. Are you willing to pay $17 million for that? That's what it comes down to, because that's what his base salary is. That is what the number is another team would take on if they decided to trade for Mike Williams. So I think a lot of people are saying, hey, Mike Williams isn't worth a 6th-round pick or a 7th-round pick. And that on its face sounds crazy. You would think that somebody would be absolutely willing because he's played much better than that.
Yeah.
The problem is the leverage, like you talked about. The Chargers don't have a ton of leverage because teams are just going to think to themselves, I could get this guy for less. Because if we're being honest, if Mike Williams is on the open market right now, I don't know if he's getting $17 million per season, right? Obviously, he's going to cost the Chargers more than 32. So, he's a $32 million receiver for them. Other teams only had to pay $17 million, which isn't that crazy for a wide receiver. The wide receiver numbers are going up.
I mean, Tyreek's making like 28.
Yeah, I mean, guys are making close to 30 now, right? Yeah. So I just don't think, because I think at this point, if you could get anything for Mike Williams, you would take it. And that might sound disrespectful because, he should be worth, given the right number contract-wise, more than, a 3rd-round pick doesn't seem crazy. A 4th-round pick doesn't seem crazy. he could produce at that level. The hard thing is the dude's missed 18 games over the last couple of years.
Yeah.
So you have someone, especially a contender, willing to put $17 million that's basically guaranteed the moment they trade for him for this season and give up cap space for that. But it's only, 2021, 2022, the dude put up 2,000 plus yards in those 2 seasons, 13 touchdowns. The guy can play, obviously. He would be a huge boost to a lot of teams. I just don't think anyone's going to be willing to play that game with the Chargers. I think teams are going to hang up quickly saying, hey, why are we going to do that? If we can wait for him to become a free agent and I can get him cheaper and also not have to give up any capital for it. So another good buy or sell that you brought up to me before the show, David, was about Jim Harbaugh. And it was this. This is the buy or sell here. Jim Harbaugh will never finish a season with a sub 500 record with the Chargers. Are you going to buy that or sell it?
Yeah, this is a really, really fun one, a really hard one, but I am going to buy it, and here's the reason why. Dating back to 2004, as a head coach of the USD Toreros, Jim Harbaugh has only had a 500 record or worse 4 times, and that includes the COVID year. So this guy just wins everywhere that he goes, and he does it consistently. I mean, ever since the beginning of his coaching career to now, that spans 20 years. This guy wins all the time. So I'm going to say with the best quarterback that he's ever had the opportunity to work with, that he is never going to finish less than 500 as head coach of the Chargers.
Yeah, I think I would buy it if I could know Justin Herbert's going to be healthy. Obviously, this is also a dude who, Alex Smith got hurt. He took Colin Kaepernick to the Super Bowl anyway. So it's not like he hasn't had success with backup quarterbacks. I just think in the AFC, though, with any backup quarterback, it's going to be extremely hard to, finish with a winning record, push for a playoff. So, I mean, hey, Bengals did pretty good with Jake Browning. There were some success stories out there. Colts almost made the playoffs with Gardner Minshew. So it can happen. And I wouldn't put it past them still being competitive, even with a backup quarterback, once he can get this team built in his image like we've talked about. But I think the hardest part for me to get over is year one. I think that's going to be the toughest because he's inheriting a situation where we know the cap situation isn't great. Getting better, and it seems like there are very many ways they could help get themselves under the cap at this point. But I think if you gave me a certified healthy Justin Herbert, 16, 17 games a season, I would absolutely buy it. I think I would buy it. But I think the big thing that would lead me to buy is the huge ability to develop coaches and replace guys that leave, right? You think back to Michigan, he lost Mike McDonald, who's now an NFL head coach with the Seahawks, and he replaced him with Jesse Minter, and the defense didn't skip a beat, right? To lose that caliber of a coach and to be able to pick somebody else up and put them in that place and not skip a beat like that is so impressive. Yeah. And I think to me, that's what would give me it's the confidence I have in that, and also the confidence I have in general manager Joe Ortiz, because that's such a huge part of it too. Knowing you have a GM that can put you in position to be over 500 in a loaded conference every single season. So I don't think it's crazy. Let's get to this next buy or sell here before we get into the break, David, which is this. The Patriots have now released former Charger Adrian Phillips, who's getting up there in age now, but the buy or sell is the Chargers should reunite with their former safety Adrian Phillips.
I love Adrian Phillips. I really enjoyed watching him play for the Chargers. He played a lot of meaningful football, played a ton of different positions for the Chargers, and played at a very high level. But he was known as a special teams ace. This is a guy that really was a demon on special teams. I think, honestly, just the way that the Chargers are going with their special teams unit, kind of going younger, going faster, going more athletic, seeing a 31-year-old Adrian Phillips here, he's has a lot of football on his body. I'm going to sell this one. I love Adrian. I have a ton of respect for him, but I just think that the way that the Chargers special teams unit is going is younger and faster, not older and more experienced.
It's interesting because you've seen guys like look at Matthew Slater from the Patriots, who's
absolutely
making all pros and Pro Bowls as a special teamer late into his well into his 30s. I still think he could be successful. I think the floor of what you get with Adrian Phillips is a good special teams player. I would buy it in the right role. I think the concerning part is last year he only played 139 snaps defensively.
Yeah,
he missed 27.8% of his tackles after being less than 7% the 3 years prior. So I do think you could hope for a legitimate bounce back in that regard. I love Adrian Phillips. I think sub packages, things like that, I still think there's something he could bring you as an experienced defender and great depth at the very, very least. And obviously that's something that's been poor for the Chargers in recent years. So I love Adrian Phillips. I wouldn't be mad at the signing if they went that direction. But I do want to talk about, big news that came out for the Chargers on Monday, which is the Chargers restructuring Corey Linsley's contract to open up some more cap space for them. What does that mean? Is he still retiring? What happens next? We're getting into all that coming up right after this. First, though, I need to tell you guys about Game Time, which is the only thing I use to get any tickets to any event. Let's just start there, because Game Time is the fast and easy way to buy tickets for all sports, music, comedy, and theater near you. With killer deals on last-minute tickets and their best price guarantee, you can stop stressing over the tickets and start getting hyped for the fun that you're going to have, because football season is over, but the events don't stop. There's so many great things. I love to just scroll Game Time and see if there's any great deals around me on different kind of shows or concerts and things still going on, even now that football season's over. And the stress you don't have, I should say, by getting the Game Time guarantee also makes a huge difference, because with the Game Time guarantee, if you find tickets in the same section in a row for less, Game Time will credit you 110% of the difference, and you always know what the actual price is of the tickets, which is great. You get to see your seat, you know the actual price, no hidden fees and things like that. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Again, that's create an account, redeem the code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. Let's continue this buy or sell here, David, with a little bit of news that came out on Monday, which was a little surprising, I think, to some people, just seeing Corey Linsley's name in the headlines. And it was from Field Yates, who said, Chargers center Corey Linsley agreed to a restructured contract that lowers his base salary from $11.5 million to the minimum for the 2024 season, which in this case is $3.8 million. This move creates $10.29 million in cap space for now, and if Linsley retires after June 1st, the team can spread that dead cap over the 2 years left on his contract. Linsley told reporters that he was 99% likely to retire this offseason. It sucks that we're having this conversation, first and foremost. I mean, Corey Linsley, in the games he played, was everything you wanted him to be and more. An actual all-pro player. He's still retiring. I'm more confident now that he's going to retire than I was even before I saw this news, because I know probably some people saw this and were like, oh, well, if they're messing around with the contract, maybe they're trying to keep him in the fold. I don't know if he said that he was going to get checked out again in March. So, I mean, I'm not even sure at this point if he totally knows, but we're going to continue the assumption, especially with all the weight he's lost and just how hard it would be for him to get back at this point, that he's still going to retire at this point. And it also just feels like this is kind of just a way to help the Chargers out a little bit, given what his situation is.
I'm with you on that. I think that's really what it is at this point in time. You know, obviously in 2023, he was diagnosed with that non-emergent heart issue that really ended, his 2023 season, and, probably for all accounts and purposes has ended his, fantastic career. So with Corey Linsley, he's been one of the best centers in all of football, pretty much the entirety of his NFL career. And I don't think that there's really anybody that the Chargers could have paired Justin Herbert with better than Corey Linsley. The fact that, he was such a commander in the middle, such a smart player, such a cerebral player, the ability for him to set protections and really kind of take a lot off of a young quarterback's plate. I don't think there could have been a better partner for Justin than Corey Linsley. And this is just another example of why Corey Linsley is a class act.
I agree. And the thing is it's not going to cost him any money. It's basically just spreading things out for the Chargers, because if he was to not have a restructured contract and he was to just retire this year, what that would do is it would basically put the last 2 years of his contract all on a dead cap hit for 2024. So that's what they're avoiding with this, is the ability to spread it out a little bit. Now it's going to be very manageable if he retires post June 1st, which is probably what's going to happen at this point. They already lowered the cap hit, helps them get over the cap in the short term, is going to give a little boost to them later on when he eventually retires, which we all expect to happen at this point. But it is buy or sell day, David, which makes it, takes us here. This is a tough one. This is a tricky one. Buy or sell, the Corey Linsley signing was a success.
Yeah, it's not that difficult for me. It's a buy. And I know that you look at this and you see a 5-year contract and, you see, him only being able to play about 3 years or 2.5 out of that deal. But you look at the production that he was able to provide. We're talking about a first-team All-Pro in 2020 and a second-team All-Pro in 2021. When Corey Linsley,
first team was with the Packers, but yeah, 2020
right.
Packers.
Right. But bringing that pedigree along, like I said before, I don't think
living up to that after he re-signed, I think is huge, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And the games that Corey Linsley was on the field and suited up for the Chargers, it was clear that it was a huge upgrade over the 3 or 4 centers that they had in the past, and it was a noticeable difference when he was out of the football game. He made the running game better. He was an excellent pass protector. I don't think he gave up a single sack his entire time that he was the center now for the Chargers, which is absolutely astonishing. Yeah. It sucks that this had to be the way to end his career here, but I still think it was a great success to bring in a successful, very accomplished center, and you got to see him work at the highest level of the game, and I do feel like that was still something that really greatly benefited Justin Herbert.
Yeah, man, it's tough because when you look at it, right, a 5-year contract like you talked about, I don't know if you ever expect that you're going to get that play for 5 seasons. So 5 seems a little bit unrealistic, right? Yeah. You were probably hoping to get a good 3 or 4 of him playing close to that level. You got 2 years of him straight being an all-pro level center.
Yeah.
But if you play 33 out of a possible 85 games, that's going to be a hard sell. Making someone the highest paid player at their position and then only getting 33 games out of that, whether it's his fault or not, which very clearly isn't his fault. Yeah. That would lead you to believe this is a sell. It wasn't a good contract, even if it might not have been Tom Telesco's fault. This is why I'm going to disagree with myself and tell you why it's a buy. Imagine the beating that Justin Herbert would have taken in 2021 and 2022 if he didn't have Corey Linsley. It already wasn't great. You saw how much, this offensive line was, house of cards that was getting held up by Corey Linsley holding everything together. Immediately, the drop-off was insane. We're talking about, does Justin Herbert want to play football? We're talking about an Andrew Luck kind of beating that he would have taken over 2021 and 2022 if they hadn't gone out there and signed Corey Linsley. So to get to this point with him, to give Justin Herbert that guy to know what it takes and have someone to help him develop that part of his game, I think it is a buy. Even though on the outside looking in, I think a lot of people would say that's not a good contract Tom Telesco handed out. I have no problem with it, especially when you compare it to some of the other actually really bad ones that he gave out. But now the thing is, David, is what's next? Because now, one way or another during this offseason, you have to find a starting center. You might need 2 centers, a starter and a backup, but you have to find a way in this offseason, whether it's in free agency or the draft, to come out with a starting day 1 center.
Yeah, you absolutely have no choice. And, you look at the center position right now for the Chargers. Will Clapp is a free agent, so there's no guarantee that he's going to come back.
And you already saw what a season's worth of Will Clapp looks like,
and
right?
You saw the
No offense
difference
to him.
Exactly. He's a backup center for sure. He's not a guy that should be starting, multiple games for you. He's a guy that should be filling in here and there. He was thrust into starting action, and yes, you saw the cavernous drop-off between himself and Corey Linsley. So I think that also just reinforces how important it is to get this position right and to really do right by getting the right player for this position. But the only player right now that's on the Chargers roster for next year at the center position is Brendan Hymus, and that's a player that they switched from being a tackle to being a guard to being a center. Yeah. And so after 3 straight position changes, and I think he played okay at center at times, still a lot to be left to be desired there. He's definitely not the center of the future for the Chargers. I think everybody who watched him play can say that pretty confidently. Nothing against him, but they need to bring in somebody who is an impact type of player, a guy that's going to come in and be able to solidify that position. And I honestly think that the way to do that is probably in the draft, and I think they're going to have to do it within probably the first 4 rounds. Corey Linsley was a 5th round pick, and so you got some phenomenal production out of that, but you're going to have to look up and down this draft and make sure that you're going to address this position, and you do it with a guy that you really believe in.
It's tough, right? Because like we talked with Keith Sanchez on yesterday's show. If you guys didn't check it out, great draft show yesterday. Yeah. All about what the Chargers could do at a lot of these positions. You're not going to have a chance likely at Jackson Powers Johnson, right? You have only Brendan Hymus on the roster. How late can you wait in the draft and still be able to argue this guy's going to come in day 1 and start?
Yeah.
That's the hard thing. And obviously, you'd be better off drafting a center. You get one on a cost control contract for 5 years at a position that's a little undervalued right now anyways, right? So, you don't necessarily want to pay top dollar at that position if you can afford it. But how long can you wait? Can you still find that guy on day 2? Can you still find that guy on day 3? How do you balance that given the needs that you have at receiver and tight end and cornerback and defensive line, right? So it's really tough, but you have to find a way to do it. And you have to, I think it's a combination of finding a cheaper veteran, taking someone on day 2 or 3 at center. Like that's just to me how it's probably going to play out in my mind at least, right? Or you could just totally flip that, take Jackson Powers-Johnson with the 5th overall pick. That's the answer. Now, will the Chargers even be at the 5th overall pick when things are all said and done? Because we know Joe Ortiz wants to trade. There's no better leverage you're going to have to trade than when you have a top 5 pick. Will the Chargers be on the clock with the 5th overall pick? We're going to talk about that coming up right after this. First, though, I want to tell you guys about FanDuel. Get buckets with your first bet on FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, because right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $150 if your bet wins. That means all you have to do is go find the bet that you think is the most of a lock for it to hit. Do that, you can win $150 in bonus bets, and you can bet on all of your favorite NBA players and teams with quick bets, live same-game parlays, exclusive props, and much more. And guys, we're right around the corner from March Madness. We're talking 3 games at a time, single game elimination, 15 games in a day. The best time to get in on the action for sure of the season, because it is just absolute chaos. And I know for me, I enjoy the chaos. And if you love football and only football, the good news is the odds are already out on the 2025 Super Bowl 2024 season Chargers plus 3,000. So if you're convinced, you can get great odds on it right now. Just visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and shoot your shot. FanDuel, official sportsbook partner of the NBA. David, let's continue this buy or sell here with the Chargers. And I think when you're thinking about the biggest storylines and overreactions, one of the big things that has followed the Joe Ortiz signing from the Baltimore Ravens, given what their draft history is how likely it is that their new general manager, Joe Ortiz, is not going to be twiddling his thumbs on draft day, and that the Chargers are going to be much more active in that regard than they were under Tom Telesco in a previous regime, who traded back 0 times in his 11-year GM career. Traded up 4 times. All the players weren't that good. Not the point.
Yeah.
But I think what they do at 5 is so interesting because there's so many different ways it could play out. But we're going to put our money where our mouths are right now. But first, I want to tell you guys, make sure you're checking out the Locked On Sports Today, first ever national 24/7 sports streaming channel, where you can get the local insight from the local Locked On experts all day, every day, the way that only Locked On can provide it. So make sure you guys go subscribe there. It's a very cool thing. First ever 24/7 national sports streaming channel. David, this is the buy or sell. I'm putting you on the spot here a little bit. Buy or sell, the Chargers will keep the 5th overall pick.
I'm selling it.
Ooh.
I think they are going to trade back. I think this is going to be the year that they do that. I think Joe Ortiz coming into a new situation, being a first-time general manager, coming from that organization, the Ravens, who trades back a ton. I mean, we talked about it a couple shows ago about how many more times they have traded than the Chargers. It is staggering. Joe Ortiz was a big part of that, make no mistake. And so I think with him understanding coming into this situation with the Chargers, knowing where their cap space situation is, knowing that they're going to have to address a lot of starters on both sides of the ball, I think he's going to want as many cracks at this draft as possible. And so the way to do that is by trading back from the number 5 spot to wherever you think you can get that deal done, and stockpiling as many picks as possible to get as many dart throws at the board to bring in as many cost-controlled contracts as you possibly can to turn this thing around as quick as possible.
It's interesting, right? Would you rather have it potentially is a quantity over quality thing, right?
It
or
is.
Quality over quantity. Do you want to take the blue chip offensive weapon with the 5th overall pick? Or do you want to give yourself, as many more chances, more top 100 picks to help you get more starters for 2024 and beyond? It's really tough, man. And I do think, I think I would sell it right now. I mean, there hasn't been much as far as substantiated rumors or any kind of reports or anything like that at this point. But if I had to guess, I think Joe Ortiz is going to have a hard time, if that phone rings. Right, because that's the other thing, is it takes a dance partner too.
Oh, yeah.
There could be no phone calls when the 5th overall pick comes up. It takes 2 to tango. It would be very hard for me to pass on Malik Nabers or Brock Bowers if they're
Same.
there. I'll say that. I mean, I think I'd have to buy this right now because there are tons of holes on the roster. I think there are only really good options, right? I think both can be good. Like, I think if they stay there and take a Malik Nabers or Brock Bowers, it's good. I think if you trade back and you are still able to, maybe get the best corner in the draft, one of the top tackles that can come in and slide in for you at right tackle right away and replace Trey Pipkins, there's not a lot of bad options there, especially if you could potentially get, 2 second-round picks this year and 2 chances at,
and
more
maybe you
starters.
trade back up in the first and get a Jackson Powers Johnson.
Well, that part I find a lot harder to believe because I don't think you would try to stockpile draft picks to just give them up and end up with the same amount, right? Even if you can maneuver a little bit. But one of the things that was great about yesterday's show was getting Keith Sanchez from the Draft Network and Locked On NFL Drafts full endorsement of Brock Bowers at 5. And even when you put out, hey, we're having someone on the show that's going to tell you who the Chargers should pick at 5, so many comments saying, well, it better be Brock Bowers. This guy's not a draft expert at all, right? Which is dumb. But it shows you, I think, how invested people are in this point at Brock Bowers being the 5th overall pick potentially. And we're Brock Bowers guys. You're not going to get an argument for us. But
we are.
The buy or sell is this. Passing on Brock Bowers with the 5th overall pick would be a mistake.
Yeah, I'm gonna sell that. I don't think it's a mistake to pass on him because there are a couple of other players. I think probably one for me in particular that would make it okay for me if they did not take Brock Bowers. If they come away from this draft with a Malik Nabers, then I will say that it is perfectly fine that you passed on Brock Bowers because he's the weapon that I think every Chargers fan has really just been envisioning put in this offense with a guy like Justin Herbert because his natural ability to separate, and nobody on this Chargers roster separates like he does on a consistent basis. And I think you'd really want to see what that looks like with Justin Herbert. I think that would be a great pairing. You see all the other great receivers have their young,
other young quarterbacks and their great receivers.
Have their young receivers, and the Chargers don't have that with Justin Herbert. And I think pairing him with Malik Nabers might be that marriage right there.
I think I'm selling it too because it's like, okay, I mean, if I was buying it just purely on what the buy or sell is, I'd be saying that, Marvin Harrison Jr. would be a bad pick if he's there. Obviously, we're assuming that's not going to happen, but like Malik Nabers would still be awesome. Rome Odunze wouldn't be necessarily my pick at 5, but he could be great too. Like writing it off right away would be dumb. I'm in full favor of taking Brock Bowers. If they go up to the thing and they say Brock Bowers, I will be happy with it.
Yeah.
I'd be over the moon with him or Malik Nabers. I think the other thing, too, is just like you've seen many other great tight ends get taken later, right? You have the last 4 this year, Kelsey Kittle, Andrew Laporta, all taken after day 1. So just because you don't get him at 5 overall doesn't mean you can't find a tight end that's going to be an impact player at the next level. You can still find that at tight end or receiver, right? But like if you're looking at the blue chip receivers, a lot of first-round picks there, too, right? I mean, much higher hit percentage, I would say, even Quentin Johnston withstanding, than you see at tight end, right? So I don't think it's a mistake if they don't go Brock Bowers. I think, again, they're going to have a lot of good options there. But would an offensive lineman be one of them? That's the last buy or sell I want to get to today, Dave, which is this. Picking an offensive lineman at 5 would be a mistake.
I'm buying it. Yeah, I think that would be an unmitigated mistake because you look at the offensive linemen that are probably up there at that range. It's Fashanu, Alt, and probably Fuaga. All of those guys are left tackles. The Chargers have a phenomenal left tackle in All-Pro Rashawn Slater. They need a right tackle. I'm not in favor of taking a left tackle and trying to convert him to a right tackle with the 5th overall pick. That's way too rich for my blood. I need a sure thing if I'm taking an offensive lineman 5th overall.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I'm on Keith Sanchez's side. I think if you are going to take a lineman at 5, you're probably going to take a left tackle and try to convert them to right tackle, or even dumber than that, I think trying to switch Rashawn Slater to right tackle, which I have no interest in doing. Ever. I think with what Keith Sanchez told us yesterday, kind of, validating our thoughts on it all along, it's just like there's enough good offensive linemen that there's no reason for you to take one at 5. If you want to trade back and take one, I totally understand that. I'm not even just totally out. Even though Trey Pipkins isn't going anywhere this year, you can save no money by getting rid of him. Does that mean you shouldn't try to upgrade on it? Not at all, right? At the same time, though, if you're convinced that you want to build through the trenches and you have to take an offensive lineman, you trade back at all costs. Like I said, it takes 2 to tango, right? But I still feel like if you're coming away with the 5th overall pick and you're sticking there and you don't come away with an offensive weapon, to me, that's a mistake. I could be wrong, sure. I'm taking a blue chip offensive option there if they're available. If Brock Bowers or Malik Nabers are available, there's not a single offensive lineman I'm taking over one of those guys. If they want to trade back, because you can still potentially trade back and still get Brock Bowers, right? That's the other thing about passing on Brock Bowers even at 5, right? If you could still trade back and potentially get him if he's
that's best case. Yeah,
that's best case scenario for us. I know it has been, since we started bringing it up. But I am not taking an offensive lineman with the 5th overall pick. I know that's going to rub people the wrong way. Some people. If you want to go offensive lineman, you trade back at all costs. That's just kind of how I feel about it at the moment. But that's going to wrap things up for today's show. We'll be back with you guys tomorrow. We could be getting into what the Chargers' biggest needs are. The offensive stay or go for the guys they have offensively that could potentially be on the Chargers or could not be, or also a Chargers mailbag. And to do that, we will put a post out on Twitter. So hit us up at LockedOnLAC, or you can call us onto the voicemail line at 323-524-7924 and leave your 30-second Chargers question and give it really that sports radio talk show kind of feel. We like hearing you guys. We like getting your voices on the show. You can also hit us up on Instagram at Locked On Chargers and our Locked On Chargers Facebook page. Also, you guys can hit us up on our Twitter because we post the show to both of our Twitters every day. Find me at Dan Talk Sports and David Drogmeyer at Dro Talk SD. So make sure you guys are back here tomorrow because it is your team every day. We do appreciate the everydayers, but until then, guys, take it easy and go Bolts.